Hey guys, doing a little video here on global imperialism part two. Main reason is in case you weren't in class on Monday, or you're not going to be in class Monday or Tuesday, if it's a snow day, if you're just absent. This will catch you up on things that we're going to be actually discussing in class for the Monday/Tuesday part of what's on Canvas. So, if you remember, last week we looked at global imperialism part one. Part of that was the scramble for Africa, where you had all of these European nations that were actually trying to get a piece of Africa for a variety of reasons. Could be diamonds, could be gold, it could be rubber that was found in Africa, different things that countries would need. Then we also looked at last week England branching out. You can kind of see in this cartoon, England is an octopus, and it's touching especially India. We talked a lot about India. And Egypt. Here's the Suez Canal right here, if you can kind of see that. But Canada, Jamaica, we also talked about England and China with the opium wars, how they got a product that the Chinese would want, and they got basically China addicted on opium, and that started the opium wars. So that was kind of part one, and what we're going to see in part two is we're going to see a branch out away from China, because we definitely saw that Britain, for instance, went into India and then into China. But we're going to see Southeast Asia, which is right here. Okay, Southeast Asia. Okay, so this is Southeast Asia. Today, places like Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, if you've ever heard of places like that, Indonesia, okay, would be here, the Philippines. So this is Southeast Asia. We're going to see an influence, a European influence there. And then also, a lot of what today we're going to talk about is Japan. So Japan was a lot like China. They wanted to be isolated from the world. And then in the 1800s, a series of events will happen that will actually make it where Japan can't stay isolated anymore. So a lot of today is going to be Japan, and Japan will go from being isolated to actually being very imperialistic. They'll want to branch out too. And so what happens? Well, now don't get freaked out by 1637. That's not that we're not going way back to then and staying there. But in 1637, the shoguns, and I don't know if you've ever heard of the shoguns before, shogun warriors, samurais, if that rings a bell. The shoguns kind of took over in Japan in 1637, and for the next 250 years, they will keep Japan entirely isolated from the rest of the world. So cities will develop. It's not like they didn't develop their country. Cities develop, they get an agricultural system that they develop, and suddenly Japan is self-sustaining. What that means is they don't need anyone else's help. So they don't need outside products. They don't need other countries to trade with them. They are self-sustaining. So that will last from 1637 all the way in, if you had 250 years, all the way into the 1800s by the time that they actually have contact with other countries again. And when will that happen? Well, that happens when the United States in 1853 decided to cruise in with their Navy into Tokyo Bay. This would be Tokyo Bay. And the Navy, the U.S. Navy, under the command of Commodore Matthew Perry, sails in to Tokyo Bay and pretty much says, "We're here." And what we do, and this is kind of this depiction here, is basically Matthew Perry says the United States is demanding you start trading, that you need to start trading with the rest of the world. Now, at the time, because the shoguns had been in charge of Japan for 250 years, they didn't really improve or modernize their military. So when the United States pulls in with their navy in the mid 1800s, Japan doesn't have anything to combat that. So what little resistance Japan actually puts into saying to the United States, no, you can't do this, it doesn't last very long. And so within a year, they're already making a treaty saying, okay, Japan's basically saying, okay, what do you want? And in the Treaty of Kanagawa, you have Japan that has to give up or open up 3 U.S. ports for the United States to start trading. So 3 ports open to trade. When that happens, Britain, France, and Russia all say, well, wait a minute. Well, if you're going to start trading in Japan, we're going to start trading in Japan. And so this literally opened up the Japanese to almost forcibly start trading with other countries after 250 years of being self-sustaining. So if you're Japan, you have a couple choices. And here are the choices. You can either resist, which didn't work out too well against the United States, or you can kind of go with it and try to do it in the way that you want to do it. So if you look at these depictions of Japan, you would see that Japan is modernizing. Railroads here, you kind of see a modernized like city square, the way we would think of it. And even the clothing is looking a little bit more modern. What Japan decides to do is from 1868 to 1912, you have the Meiji Restoration. And what this is Japan, a rich country, strong military. They aren't going to lose themselves. They say, yes, we're going to make some adjustments to what we do. Obviously, they're going to modernize, but at the same time, we're not going to lose who we are. And so they form a Congress, which you could say kind of mimics us. It's called the Diet, and one house is elected by the people. The other house in their Congress and the Diet is chosen by the emperor. They start doing industrialization, roads, maps, different port cities. You have the mail that starts for the first time, the telegraph. You have different things that they're doing to modernize themselves, but the whole time that they're doing it, Japan is not going to lose who they are. So, in a lot of countries, and this is where if you're a United States citizen, this sometimes gets a little hard to understand. The United States doesn't have a common culture. We really don't. We are a blend of a whole bunch of different cultures from all over the world. You can even argue that the United States also is a blend of language, too. That, yes, we speak English, but not everybody speaks English. And so, in other countries like Japan, they have one common culture. They are Japanese. That is it. They have one common language, Japanese. That is it. And so, what the Japanese start doing is while all of these improvements are taking place, that's great. They're not losing who they are. And they start talking about, if you notice up here, they start talking about building a Japanese empire. So if you can't beat them, join them. So if we're going to have to, if you're Japan and you're saying if we're going to have to basically start trading with everybody, well, then we're going to start our own empire too. And so Japan actually will take on China in the Sino-Japanese War, and they will start building their military, Japan. So remember over here, a strong military. One of the things they start trading with other countries for is military weapons. They improve their military. And so by the time they start fighting China, they'll fight Russia. They start getting land like Korea, Taiwan, Manchuria, and the Japanese empire begins to grow. And they start doing what the other countries were doing to them. So this will continue. Notice 1942, that's World War II. This will continue all the way through both world wars, where Japan will start building themselves up and starting their own empire, in a sense. So what's going to happen in the rest of Southeast Asia and the Pacific, if you notice here, Britain, the Dutch is the Netherlands. That's the Netherlands. The British, the Dutch, the French, obviously France, Portuguese, Spanish, they all start taking a piece of either Southeast Asia or the Pacific Islands. They all start coming out into here. And this is a map, kind of a broader area of the ocean. So here's Southeast Asia, Indonesia, the Philippines, and then all of these little islands are going to start being claimed too. This is where the United States will eventually get involved because notice it says US up here. We're right here, and we start seeing European countries taking parts of the Pacific, and we want a piece of it for ourselves. So this kind of opens this part of the world up to imperialism. Japan didn't want to do it, but once it started happening kind of by force, they decided to start building up their country and making their own empire in this part of the world. And that will last all the way through World War II. So this is the second part of globalization, global. Imperialism is going throughout the world, okay? And what we're going to see later this week is the United States will join in, and we will start branching out and starting to claim things that aren't necessarily ours. Or, for instance, if you're Spain and you have something the United States wants, like the Philippines, maybe we just need to take it from you. And now, did I mention there's a world war coming? And when you have different countries branching out in the world, they're going to butt heads. And eventually that could lead to conflict, which we'll talk about with World War I coming up. So hopefully that makes some sense. That's Global Imperialism Part 2. And later this week, we talk about the United States. See you guys.